All right, so I'm Howie Forman. I'm a professor in the School of Management and the School of Public Health, and I'm the faculty director of our joint degree program at those schools. I'm joined today by three of our current joint degree students, and they're going to assist me in hopefully explaining our various joint degree programs for you at the School of Management and the School of Public Health. I'm going to let them start off by introducing themselves. I want to just say a quick word about me. I'm a practicing radiologist and a faculty director for finance in the medical school, as well as teaching undergraduates and graduate students at Yale University and being the co-founder of the MD MBA program and the executive MBA program. And have been really delighted to be attached to the School of Management for 27 years now and to the School of Public Health for 22 years now. And I am absolutely convinced that when it comes to the healthcare management sphere, that we have the best program offerings in the country. And I want to make sure that if you come here, that you know what the assets are that we provide and make sure they're good for you, because not everybody is an ideal match for us. We just want to be able to find people who appreciate what we're able to offer you. So let me start off. We're going to go in order at times. We have Julia, Thaniya, and Guari, who are three different students. They're in three different tracks of our joint degree program, and they'll tell you about that and the year that they're in. And I want to just start off by letting them tell you about number one, what they did before they came to our school, to Yale University, what track they're in, and also, if they've already done an internship, for those that are beyond the first year, what type of work they've done in the internship. And I'll just start with Julia, then move to Thaniya, and then Guari.
Hi everyone, Julia Phaltankar. So I'm originally from outside of DC in Northern Virginia. But prior to Yale, I worked at Epic Systems, the electronic health record company, doing implementations of the software at different health systems. And then upon coming to Yale, I'm in the 3-year program. But unlike Gari, who's the other 3-year program person with me, I actually applied for the MBA once I had already been at the School of Public Health for about a semester. So maybe something we can touch on, later in this particular programming. And then I guess kind of along those lines, I'm also in my 3rd year as well. So this is my final year. And so because of that, I've also had 2 internships under my belt. So my first internship was a hospital administrative internship at the Cleveland Clinic. And then this past summer, I was doing healthcare consulting as a consultant intern at Chartis, which is a healthcare consulting firm. So happy to meet you guys and excited to share more about the program with you all.
Hi everyone, nice to see you all. My name is Thaniya. I am a current first year MBA and MPH in the healthcare management concentration. So I recently just started. I started in July before SOM. So I'm coming from California before SOM and YSPH here. I was working in the nonprofit scene. So I founded Fight for Autism, which was an organization dedicated to individuals with autism. And my main goal was to just create a safe space for them. Within there, I created a mentorship program for college students to go into special needs classrooms and provide support to elementary students. After that, I did mostly federal work. So I worked at the CDC first. I was doing a lot of public health interventions within their tuberculosis control program, especially for individuals experiencing homelessness. Then I moved to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, where I focused on civil rights compliance and systems level equity oversight for state level nutrition and food safety programs. So I think we'll talk about kind of why we're coming here later on, but it's so nice to see you all.
And just to point out, you're in the 2-year program, just so that people keep track that there's a 2-year and a 3-year track, and it's at your option once you're accepted. But we'll come back to that as well.
Right.
Hi, you guys. My name is Guari Binoy. Like Julia mentioned, I am in the 3-year MBA MPH program. I came into Yale knowing that I do the 3-year program, so I applied to both degrees simultaneously, which is something I'm sure that Howie will touch on a bit later. Prior to Yale, I was working in healthcare consulting at Huron. I was doing a lot of operational and implementation focused healthcare consulting, and I also did a lot of policy work. So I got really interested in healthcare, specifically pharmaceutical policy. So that was also something I was doing tangentially to my consulting work, and that sort of intersection is what made me really interested in the dual degree. Like Julia, I've also had 2 internships. I did one internship in pharma strategy at the National Pharmaceutical Council my first summer, and then this past summer I was doing health policy consulting at Manat. Super excited to see all of you guys here, and hope you guys are definitely interested in applying for this program because it's been really, really awesome.
And maybe it's a good time to start off, since the two last of you have this contrast about why you chose 3 years, why you chose 2 years. I mean, for some people, it may be self-obvious why someone chooses one or the other, but maybe just to expand on what you saw as the advantages and disadvantages of each track. And you
Yeah.
can go first, Gary. Sorry, I should have said that. Sorry.
No, you're good. No, that's a great question. I think, when it comes to 3-year versus 2-year, obviously, it's sort of personal circumstances. So I think that's a factor to really consider, like your ability to invest. A whole extra year is definitely not something that you should take lightly. But for me, for example, I felt comfortable in sort of being able to be in grad school for that long, just given how many years of work experience I've had and sort of the resources that I wanted to utilize at Yale to kind of pivot or solidify the focus of my career. So I think personal circumstance, financial circumstance as well. Obviously, an extra year does add extra cost, and that is also something to be conscientious about. But thirdly, I would say too, I think, kind of taking the logistics out of it, for me, it really was to optimize that intersectional, I think, world that I live in right now between the public health school and the business school. The way that the 3-year program works is the first year was the MPH core, second year was the MBA core, and the third year is kind of a mix. But I'm in the healthcare management program that Howie is our director for, and a lot of that MPH work is very much intertwined with SOM, the School of Management. And so I think I've just been able to learn a lot being in classroom settings over 3 years. And then also there's so many extracurricular opportunities and, just things that you can get involved with at Yale. And so I think 3-year program seemed like a great way for me to make sure I can at least get a little bit below the tip of the iceberg. I've definitely not hit everything, but that was also something that I really considered.
Yeah, coming to the 2-year, I actually spoke with Gari before, or when I was applying and before I had gotten in here, and she was so, so helpful with honestly the whole process. She almost basically convinced me to do 3 years. But for me, it was more so like financial reasons. I am coming from 2 years of government work experience. So given I was on a federal salary, I didn't have that much to put into grad school. And then also, I wanted to do the healthcare management track because I thought that would set me up for the most success given the pathway I want to pursue after grad school. So, with the 2-year program, you are mandated to do the healthcare management concentration. With the 3-year program, you get the option to choose. But because I, anyways, wanted to do the healthcare management, it just worked out to do the 2 years. I will say, being here, it is very quick. I started at YSPH in summer, and I did 3 core classes there. And now my whole first year will be the MBA core classes. So it has been so quick. I feel like I've been here for multiple years, but also that I've been here only for a couple weeks. So it's a crazy balance, but yeah, we're still learning how to balance everything, and it's been such a great opportunity so far.
I want to come back to that. Julia, can you speak to a little bit more broadly what you see as the essential features of the core curriculum for the School of Management and the core curriculum for the School of Public Health? How do they interact with each other? And then maybe end with what your favorite extracurricular or co-curricular activities have been.
Sure. So, I mean, I think coming into the program, as I mentioned, I was just starting off as I'm just pursuing the MPH, and I think having the insight, kind of like of a semester, to kind of figure out maybe what are the areas that I felt like an MBA curriculum specifically could kind of supplement what I was already learning through the healthcare management program, I think was really helpful. So I think from a healthcare management perspective and from a MPH perspective, I thought it was really, really unique. And I think still one of my favorite classes has been our core health policy class, because that's something that is, I would say, very unique to the MPH program. Whereas, you're not necessarily going to take a kind of a public policy class for the most part from an MBA kind of side of things. So in that sense, I thought having those more specific, obviously, healthcare oriented classes, I thought was super, super helpful just from like the perspective of the core. And then of course with the MBA, although there's like a decent amount of overlap, I would say, with some of the MPH classes, like we take healthcare operations and we take kind of more standard operations from the MBA side of the core. Some of the other things that I thought, I found very valuable to supplement the MPH were some of those like investor specific classes, those finance classes from the core that I felt like kind of gave me a more broader business perspective in addition to having that kind of healthcare focus that was provided by the MPH. And so definitely, I think they've played off a lot on each other. So that's been really, really unique and really helpful. I think, especially knowing that I want to stay within the healthcare industry after graduation. And then I guess, Howie, to touch on your last question in terms of extracurriculars that I find particularly enjoyable. One thing has been the Haven Free Clinic, which is a super unique opportunity. It's kind of a joint partnership with a few of the different schools at Yale. So in that sense, you really get to kind of meet new people from other programs and really kind of come together as an entire village to really put on this kind of very impactful group within the New Haven community as a whole. And so one thing that I've done within that has been the QA/QI department, which is more so from like an operations perspective. If there are certain projects or processes in the day-to-day clinic functions that we feel like could be potentially streamlined, and what are different ways that we might be able to solve for that. So that's been something that I've really enjoyed. And then also ski club at SOM has been fun as well.
Great. Same final question for you, Thaniya, and then Guari.
Yeah, with extracurriculars, so I'm currently the co-deputy chair for the Yale Healthcare Conference. I'm a 1-year lead for the Net Impact Club at SOM, and I'm also the first-year lead for the Student Government Admissions Chair. All of these have just been so great in just helping me develop such a wide skill set. So specifically with the healthcare conference, and this was how he helped me, he introduced healthcare conference to us, and he was like, if you guys are interested in it, I'll kind of put a word in, and it kind of just went from there. So it's just so nice to see that the YSPH and SOM, they're so like well integrated with each other. Because this is an event that a lot of the professional schools host, but mainly YSPH and SOM. And we're still at very much the beginning stages. It's a conference, one of the biggest healthcare conferences, according to Howie, in the country. But it's been such a great opportunity to work with my co-chairs. And we've put together our 4 executive committees. So we have around 16 to 18 people, students working on it. And it's in April. So we started 2 months ago. So it's such a huge event that we will spend months planning for. And it's so nice to see how it just gets executed the day of. In terms of student government, the admissions chair, that was something I was always very much interested in. When I came here, or even when I was applying, I feel like I got so much help from current students at YSPH and SOM, and this was my way to give back to the community. So yeah. That's me.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, now I'm thinking back, and like in 3 years you do so much. So I definitely like echo what Julia and Thaniya said about some of the stuff that they've done. So my first year when I was at YSPH, I did a lot of YSPH focused work. So some things that are really interesting is that there's a lot of research labs or kind of public health programs, like the Global Health Leadership Initiative was something that I was involved with at YSPH, where they do global public health work, but also state level Connecticut work. So that was something that really sort of addressed that public health interest that I had. I also volunteered for Haven Free Clinic, which is a really, really cool opportunity. Something that I've done across my 3 years at Yale is be a part of Yale Ventures, which is essentially like you work with faculty members and research workers based at Yale who are, doing a lot of incredible work in a variety of areas, whether that's the environment, whether that's public health, whether that's digital health, et cetera, and essentially help them figure out how can you commercialize your research into being a tangible product or business in a way that, really fulfills the impact that they're hoping to have. So I think that has been a really, really interesting experience to sort of build, I think, venture understanding, investment understanding, but also just like your basic, almost like consulting skills in a way. So that's been really interesting to be a part of. Also, at SOM, there's a lot of really cool, I think, integration of healthcare and kind of like business sustainability, I would almost say. Last year, I was part of the Mung Fund, which is like which is a impact investment fund, which focuses solely on investments through an impact lens. So I was on the healthcare portfolio team, and we essentially, worked through sourcing, worked through, pitching a company that we thought would be really valuable for this fund allocation. And so I think that's what I really enjoy about the dual degree is that you're kind of thinking about that interoperability between the two spheres and, figuring out how you can be a really strong middleman, not only in these organizations, but even in your career. And then lastly, the student clubs at SOM are awesome. Like Julia, Thaniya talked about different ones. I am currently the president of the Healthcare and Life Sciences Club. And I feel like student organizations are just also a really great way to give back in the sense of, one of my big goals this year as president is like, how can we facilitate more community and kind of give people ways and information to, sort of build on their career, figure out things that they're also interested in. And so that's also been a really, really fulfilling experience to also meet other individuals involved in healthcare at SOM. So yeah.
I'm going to go to the questions and also allow you to raise your hand and ask questions. So either way, I'm going to get to that eventually. But I first wanted for each of you to just give us a little bit about your experience with the career services at both schools, and then also what your next steps are. So for some of you, it's a full-time job, and for some of you, it's a summer job. What your experience is with that process to date at this point. And we'll start, I think, with Julia this time.
Yeah, so I think the career services at both schools have been super helpful, and it's been nice that you kind of get to use both. So you almost have kind of double the team behind you to kind of help you through some of the recruitment processes. I do think like each respective school kind of has their own strengths. So when I was doing some of the more administrative internship fellowship applications, I really felt like obviously YSPH was a really good fit for that, and obviously the community and my other peers were also applying for similar things. So in that sense, that was a very helpful kind of supportive group to navigate that process. And then last summer, when I was doing healthcare consulting was something that I'd never done before. So it was really unfamiliar with the whole case process. I felt that the SOM kind of niche also is a lot of it is consulting. So I felt like that was really helpful in terms of navigating that. And then I guess even beyond the career development offices, the CDO, something that I really utilized heavily at SOM was the consulting club. So that's a student-run organization. They really walk you through the process of how to make sure that you're, prepping appropriately for cases, for your behavioral interviews. And so when it came down to applying for those internships last fall, I really felt prepared to kind of go into interview season and all that kind of stuff with the right resources and tools. And then I guess to your last question about what my plans are after school. So I accepted a return offer for the same firm that I was interning at over the summer. So very happy to be going back there to Chartis.
Great. And we have a huge core of people that have either been at Chartis or at Chartis. So we have a nice history there. Thaniya.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like in the thick of recruiting. So I've mostly been using SOM's CDO office, which is their career development office. And it's been so incredible. I think I've had my resume ripped apart and put together a few times now. And just like now seeing it in its final form, I'm so confident about it. And they really just help you kind of through everything. So it was first resumes and cover letters and getting those together. And now going into like mock interviewing and behaviorals. We actually had, or the CDO invited external consultants to come in and prep us or like give us mock behavioral interviews. So there's truly just so many resources here, and they truly do set you up for success. I want to echo everything that Julia said as well about the consulting clubs and the career focused clubs here. They do such an incredible job at just helping you go through the entire timeline as if you are recruiting for those specific firms. So we have really strong consulting, IB, and tech clubs. And with consulting, I've just been following their entire timeline. So right now we're at casing and preparing for cases for consulting interviews. So it's been so helpful. Consulting Club works very directly with CDO as well. So yeah, I think they do an incredible job. I'm in the thick of recruiting, so we'll see how it ends up. I'll let you guys know.
Yeah, I echo very similar sentiments to what was already said. One thing that I will say that I really appreciate about YSPH is I think that SOM is really, really good with sort of pipeline careers. So consulting, health tech, et cetera. Like they have the resources that you'll need. And like Julia and Thania said, like you will be absolutely fine using those resources. But I do encourage people to kind of think outside of the box a little bit because there is a lot more that you can do in healthcare beyond just consulting. And I feel like YSPH was really, really helpful for that. Actually, my first internship I got my first year was through a connection that Howie put me in touch with. So I would say like YSPH is a really good way to, or your connections at YSPH, the faculty, your department heads, et cetera, like they know so many people, their networks are so full that I think it's a really nice balance of having like the, SOM CDO that's very solid, very, I need case prep. Where can I find that? But then also being like, let me set up a lot of coffee chats with some really, really cool people. And you never sort of know how that's going to unfold. And I think overall, like, I definitely could not have gotten either of my internships without the connections that I have here. Also, peers are really helpful, like looking at people who have done internships at places, they can give you references or really just give you like insight into like what does an internship look like, right? I think those are also really, really helpful conversations. So that would be my add is that I think with the dual degree, you get the opportunity to kind of explore very different networks. And I think that's very expansive. I don't think if I was in just one of the schools, I would have been able to do kind of the range of internships that I've had. And then in terms of what I'm doing after graduation, so I did do consulting prior to grad school, like I mentioned. So I decided that I didn't really want to do that again. So I will be doing a rotational program at Takeda, which is a pharmaceutical company that's based in Boston. So that's an 18-month program, and I'm super excited about it, and definitely could not have gotten it without the CDO resources at SOM and as well as just kind of the conversations that I've had at YSPH as well.
Great. I'm going to try to answer a few quick questions. Then I'm going to pose one more question to the panel, and then I'm going to start with Leo and anyone else who raises their hand with a question or eventually put something in the chat. I want to first clarify for anyone who doesn't know, the application process is a two-school application process. There is no single dual application. That is intentional. It may be a little bit inconvenient for some people, but it makes sure that you are accepted to both schools independently. And then once you're accepted to both schools independently, then you are permitted to choose either of the 2 or the 3-year tracks for which you've been accepted. So it could be healthcare management, or it could be health policy in the School of Public Health, or another track. And if you want to do the 2-year track, then it's only healthcare management. You have independent evaluation of the applications. The schools do coordinate knowledge of your application, so we are aware of that, but there's no particular advantage to having applied to one or the other. They're independently evaluated. Similarly, it's useful to know that your financial aid is tied to the school for each semester that you're in school. And so in the 3-year track, you're in the School of Public Health for 1.5 years, and in your School of Management for 1.5 years. In the 2-year track, you're in the School of Management for 1.5 years. You're in the School of Public Health for 1 semester plus 1 summer, and your financial aid will track that. And so it's very important you pay attention to those issues as well, because you may get, I'm just making this up at the moment, you might have a much more generous financial aid package at the School of Management, which also, by the way, starts off with a higher tuition. And you may have a less generous School of Public Health with a lower tuition. You have to be able to look at that comprehensively to be able to evaluate what that means for you. I'm just looking, there are separate deadlines for the 2 schools. The MBA program has 3 different rounds, and they make decisions in 3 different cycles. The School of Public Health has a single deadline, which is flexible. I'm saying that intentionally not to encourage you to be late, but it is flexible in the sense that if you make a decision very late, do not think that all is lost. We will reconsider things even months later. If you've been accepted to the MBA program and you want to consider the School of Public Health later, we will look at that as late as we can accommodate seats and making decisions for you. Somebody asked about how to put together the description of quantitative experience. I would tell you to speak to the School of Public Health admissions office to get advice on that. In general, there are many different ways to document your quantitative experience. However, if you're in the joint degree program, you will have already demonstrated quantitative expertise through your GMAT or GRE, which is required for the School of Management, not required for the School of Public Health. But obviously for the joint degree, you would have had that. There's also a question about the MD, MBA, what would happen, in other words, for medical students that come and do the joint degree program. In my recollection, I think we've had 2 students come here, maybe it's 3 now, who are already in the middle of medical school and did the MPH MBA in 2 years here. That is definitely doable. Typically done after the 3rd year of medical school. You come here for 2 years and you return to your home school to finish medical school at that point. I'm going to now ask the question of the panel, which is a sort of composite of questions that have been asked over here. One is, and you'll figure out how to answer it for each of you, but how did you know that the dual degree program was the best for you versus solely an MBA or solely an MPH? And then related to that, how did you choose Yale over another school? What considerations did you make about Yale to decide to come here? And I think I'll start, since I've never started with Thaniya, I'll start with her this time. We'll go to Guari and then Julia.
Yeah, sure. So when I was thinking about graduate schools, it was January of last year, which is insane to say. We've come so far, but January of last year, I was thinking of, or it was January of the year before, but I was thinking of grad school, and I was pretty sure I wanted to do the MPH because I was coming from a public health background. I studied biology and law in undergrad, and public health and like research was always in the back, like in my experience. So it was kind of like, yeah, this is the path, MPH is the path. And then I started looking more into the MBA, and it is a lot of reflection. I was first trying to work backwards. So I wanted to start a venture, or I want to start a venture for individuals with autism and just create like an all-encompassing organization. Just because of personal connection, I've seen the gaps in autism care and just support and resources in the community. So that's my long-term goal. And then I was working backwards to create a venture of large scale. And if I want to scale nationally, I would need like the business toolkit and experience. So then I started looking into the MBA. And it kind of just fit together, the MBA and MPH. I wanted a program that was very well integrated, and Yale is one of the best, in my opinion, my very unbiased opinion, the best in the country. It does such a good job at integrating just like the public health lens with business terminology and just classes. And there's so much here that they provide with wherever you want to go. So involved in the Sustainable Health Initiative, which is basically an organization that allows you to kind of build out your venture. And even if you just have an idea, kind of build it out here. And there's so many entrepreneurial and like startup resources here if that is the space you want to go. So yeah, the MPH MBA kind of just came together for me. Why I chose Yale, there was a lot of reasons. The main thing was the people and the community that I saw here. So as I started talking to, I did a lot of networking before I even applied. I think I talked to around 30 to 40 students at Yale across both the MBA, across both SOM and YSPH. I don't recommend, you don't need to talk to that many people, but it kind of speaks to how willing people were able to give me their time and just answer the questions I had and the concerns I had and kind of look at my application essays and see if it was good and look at my resume. And Guari was even one of those people. She also ripped apart my resume a couple times and we built it together. But it spoke to kind of the community here, and everyone's so supportive. Everyone wants to see you win. There's truly no like competitive nature here. And I wanted a space in grad school where I was able to grow and grow alongside my peers, and we weren't kind of like, against each other's successes. So yeah, many great reasons to come to Yale, but that was one of my main ones.
Yeah, I think I'm next. I completely echo everything that Thaniya said on a lot of different levels. So I'll speak specifically though for me, why dual degree. So kind of like I mentioned with my background, I was doing almost a bit of like living in the middle of, working in policy, working in business. And I think for me, it kind of stemmed from a place of just personal interest. I felt like in the spaces that I had been in and kind of in the places that I'd worked in healthcare, there were a lot of people who either knew like the policy, public health side of things, or just knew the business operations of healthcare. And I think obviously both areas of subject matter expertise are really, really critical. But I feel like one of the biggest issues that we're seeing in healthcare right now is that we don't have the sort of people who can, I would say, speak all the different languages and kind of understand and build on sustainability. And like I had mentioned earlier, like interoperability between these different spheres. And so from a personal lens, I really wanted to like live in that intersection in my career. Like that's something that I was really interested in. And I felt like the dual degree was just perfect for that, right? You're constantly living in that world in between your classes and your extracurriculars, even the people that you interact with, like MPH students and MBA students are very different. And I feel like in the best possible way. And I feel like that's also made me and given me the opportunity to meet a lot of unique and diverse group of people. I also do think like in terms of practicality, like your MBA gives you a lot of business acumen, kind of like what Thaniya is saying. Like if you want to be in sort of career positions, maybe where you're in leadership or maybe where you're, really focused on, high level management roles, I think the tide is shifting. I don't think you need an MBA, but I think it's really helpful. Like even in my internship this past summer, like even your, from like a financial perspective, right? Like even your pay or et cetera, like salary, if those are things that are valuable to you, it's something to consider in terms of kind of I think the discrepancies that come with just having an MPH versus just having an MBA. But, also for me, the other thing that I really wanted to emphasize as well is like, I think the curriculum of both alone wasn't enough for me to sort of just want to pursue one. Like, I think the MPH has a lot of kind of like Julia said earlier, like a lot of really unique classes focused on public health, public policy, but I was also missing some of that finance knowledge that I didn't have in undergrad. I was in a STEM/social sciences undergraduate degree. And so I also realized like people have been saying, like, if you want to be in those spaces, you need to have that knowledge. So it just kind of made sense. Like, I think joint degrees are awesome across the board, like not even just MBA, MPH, MD, MBA. Like, I think it just makes people smarter and like better workers in the future. And so I'm a really, really big fan of it. In terms of why Yale, I'm sure a lot of you know, if you've been, looking at Yale and kind of interested in it, that SOM is really focused on this whole business and society mission. And I think that's not just a mission that they, put on a pamphlet and, say like, yeah, it's a thing and it's not really a thing. It really is. Like people who come to SOM are from such unique backgrounds. We have so many people from nonprofit backgrounds. We have people from, super typical like business backgrounds. We have people from, just like all across the board. And I also feel like the core curriculum emphasizes that. Like we have a state and society class that like kind of talks about policy and public health to some degree. And it's like really interesting to kind of think about it through the business lens. And as well as at YSPH, I think the range of departments that YSPH has, like even though I'm in healthcare management, I'm able to connect with people in other departments and take classes and electives in those spaces. And I think that's really awesome. Like Yale really gives you the opportunity that even if you're in a program, you still can do a lot outside of just the, echo chamber of maybe your cohort or the specific department that you're in. And then the people, like I also felt the same way. Like when I came to interview, when I came to talk to people, like people are just nice here. And faculty are really helpful, and you just really build a community. Like I've made some like really amazing friends in my time at Yale, and yeah, just a lot of good things to say all across the board. But that is really why I picked Yale, and then why I picked the dual degree as well.
I don't honestly have too much to add. I feel like Guari really kind of summarized everything, really nicely. I guess the one thing that I would maybe add is kind of in addition to the academic kind of not gaps, but maybe some of the differences between the MPH and the MBA curriculum being one of the reasons why I decided to apply midway through my MPH. Another thing was just in terms of the jobs that I was seeing out there. I came into the MPH really thinking that I was, administrative internship or fellowship or nothing. And I've kind of come to realize after doing that for a summer that, maybe there's some other things that I want to explore. All that being said, what I'm doing now of being a healthcare consultant, I don't necessarily need an MBA for. There are students from YSPH who have MPHs that are working at the same exact firm. The biggest difference that I would maybe call out, and is something that Guari touched on, again, if it's something that's important to use, the financial piece. And then also I had, some work experience coming into the program, and having an MPA in some senses does help you propel your career quite a bit. Just if you look at kind of the job postings that are out there. So I think that's kind of ultimately what made me, decide to kind of do the dual degree route. And then again, I mean, everyone's been talking about the community, but it's true. New Haven is definitely not a big city by any means. And so having a really strong group of friends and community around you really helps make the city kind of what it is. So I can leave it at that.
One question I think I'm going to answer my own way. The question I realize comes from what I think Julia was saying, but or maybe it was Thaniya was saying, there are constraints in doing the 2-year program. Like there's just fewer hours available to take the courses. And so Yale is also a small campus. It's a lot smaller than I think people who haven't been here think it is. And that means that there are many great courses that are offered only at a very specific time, only one time a year. And so you do have to make choices. And when you only have 5 semesters available to you in the 2-year program, that's very different than when you have 6 full semesters available to you. And so in that way, you have to be able to balance that back and forth. And that's why we say that there are some constraints with that. A question about how many years of experience do you need? And the individual says they have 3 years. We've had people admitted to the program with as few as 1 year of experience, but generally 2 or 3 years is usually the minimum when people apply to the joint degree program. So a lot of them are common themes. I'm just going to ask it my own way. And I'll give you, this will be the last question, then I'll go to Catherine and we'll wrap up. But quick answer for Julia, Thaniya, and Guari. Where do you see like the integration of the 2 degrees? Are they completely distinct in parallel, or are there opportunities that you see where the 2 degrees actually are collaborating with one another while you're here? We'll start with Julia and move along.
Yeah, I think they're definitely collaborative, I would say. I think it's interesting because kind of from a healthcare management perspective, one of our requirements, I guess, just as an example, is healthcare operations. And so we look at, queuing theory and all that kind of stuff. from a very healthcare perspective. And then one of the core curriculum classes for the MBA is kind of operations in general. And so it's been interesting to kind of take both the very specific healthcare focused lenses that we, obviously apply from the perspective of the MPH, and also having kind of the more broader perspective from the MBA. And so in that sense, I think they are very complementary. And even more broadly, I guess, I touched on health policy as being one of my favorite classes. We have another class at SOM called State and Society, which is also kind of, again, more of like a public policy perspective, but more so from a business lens. And so I think having the specific information that we get from the School of Public Health regards to health policy, and then also being able to tie it more broadly to overall global society, I think has been really, really interesting. So all that to say, I think they're very complementary.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I don't know if I have much to add to this because I haven't been able to take classes that are integrated in both SOM and YSPH. It's mostly been so summer I did the YSPH core or the MPH core, and now I'm doing the MBA core. But I'll kind of do my take on extracurriculars, which I think we touched on earlier, that integrates both. So specifically with the healthcare conference. And I highly recommend you guys join in person if you are in town in April. But I think it's a team of both MPH and MBAs and MPH MBAs. So I think even just being on a team with so many students with such a wide range of backgrounds and knowledge, it's been so nice to see how each other knows different knowledge and how we're able to put it together and kind of come up with the best conference possible. So I think in terms of extracurriculars as well, we're able to kind of work with students with such various backgrounds. And that's kind of how I've seen the integration come together as well.
Yeah. Not too much to add. I totally agree with the sort of one-to-one with like the actual technical classwork. You really do see that sort of, I would say, like big picture, and then zoom into healthcare, kind of thinking about the contrast between MBA core versus MPH core. One thing I will add, which is maybe not as like quantifiable, is I feel like my way of thinking has become very versatile. Like I'll sit in like a SOM class that's very focused on like entrepreneurship. Like I took a public health entrepreneurship class, and there's a mix of like MPH and MBAs in the classroom. And I found that like I'm able to sort of think about, the success or functioning of a system in the lens of both what are the public health impacts, what are the social health impacts, how can we think about these things in the context of whose lives we're able to improve, but then also think about like the practicality, right? Like how do you get that finance, how do you sustain that, where do you get funding from, what does scaling look like? And so it's funny because I always joke like undergrad was such like drinking from the fire hose that sometimes I look back and I'm like, wait, how much did I actually learn? But throughout grad school, I've been like, wow, I'm like really learning how to think. And that's been really helpful in the internships that I've had. Like, I think I'm able to think about things in a very unique lens. And I feel like it's really only facilitated by being in the dual degree. So that's also something where I think I see that every day, just kind of how I think about things and like how I think about problems in sort of how they're discussed in class.
Okay. I'm going to wrap up here just so we finish on time. I want to thank everybody for attending, and definitely want to thank our three panelists and our current students for participating. Everybody is by their first name dot last name at yale.edu if you wanted to reach us individually. I have both Howie.Forman and Howard.Forman at yale.edu if you needed to reach me. We're happy to answer questions. The admissions office is happy to answer questions. I think in the chat box, you'll see that there are the email addresses for both admissions offices for your reference as well. And this will be online for you to listen to again if you've missed something. But we really appreciate you all attending. Hope you got a lot out of it and hope to see you soon.